So this is week 4 of our life group videos where we have been doing a little bit of talk back from what we have heard Pastor Cliff share on the weekend. And so this last weekend, Cliff was talking about the idea of what it means to count the cost. What matters most in our lives? I've always thought that the things that matter most in our lives don't happen by accident. If we truly care about something, if we're truly invested in something, it drives us to actually be intentional about making it happen. And so if you want to know what really matters in your life, you can look at your calendar, you can look at your checkbook, and you'll often see that we are very intentional with the way that we use our time, with the way that we use our talents to accomplish whatever it is that matters to us. This week we wanted to talk a little bit more about what it means to count the cost for the things that matter to us. And so we're going to look at a story from Jesus' life in Luke chapter 14. At this point, Jesus has a large crowd that's following after him. And this large crowd has been coming after him to hear his teaching, to learn what he is saying. And he gets to a place where he's not so thrilled with having the large crowds anymore. And he says, look, there's a reality. I know a lot of you are excited. A lot of you get caught up in the emotions of following after this great rabbi, this great teacher. But let me tell you what it truly means to follow after me. And so in Luke chapter 14, verse 25, Jesus turns to the crowd and it says that a large crowd was following after him. And he turned around and he said to them, if you want to be my disciple, you must by comparison hate everyone else. Your father, your mother, wife, children, brothers and sisters. Yes, even your own life. Otherwise you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin the construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money. And then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started the building and couldn't even finish it. Or what kind of king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers that were marching against him? And if he can't, he's going to send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It's thrown away. Anyone who has ears to hear should listen and understand. Jesus says some pretty harsh things to the people that are following after him, to the crowd. He looks at them and there's a lot of people who are excited and who are thrilled because they believe they found the coming Messiah. But at the same time, Jesus looks past just their excitement and their outer perspective, and he looks at their heart and says, let's be honest. Following me is not an easy task. Following me is going to cost. And so he challenges them. Have you even begun to count the cost? Do you realize what it means to follow after me? For a lot of people, they probably heard this and were very confused. Even as I read it, I sit there and think, Jesus doesn't like family? That's not what he's talking about at all. But he says, are you willing to give up absolutely everything to be a follower of me? Are you willing to put everything on the line? And he uses two particular examples where he says a builder will not go in and start building something and realize they only have the money for the foundation and they stop. Think about that. In today's world, if you had a contractor come in and begin a building and they told you it was only going to cost $10,000 and that just put down the foundation and then they walked away, how long would that business be open? Or he said, think about an army, a general who is going against this massive force that is marching against him. He's not going to go against this force with a smaller number if he doesn't know for sure that he can win. See, we have to understand that achieving success at the end of a journey usually starts even before the beginning of a journey. If you want to be successful, if you want to have that completion, have that result at the end, you have to count the cost before you even begin. And really what he talks about is he talks about the difference between commitment and conviction. See, commitment is something that we're all, we can come up and we can say we're committed to a lot of things, but when life gets in the way, when life gets difficult, when things come against us, commitments, we've seen them time and time again in our culture, in our society, commitments get broken. Commitments get dropped because life gets hard. And the one thing that Jesus promises followers is in this life, you will have troubles. But Jesus says there's something different when you move a step beyond commitment into this idea of conviction. Not the negative conviction of, oh, I did something wrong and I need to change, but the conviction that is a passion, it is a deeply held belief that drives you forward so that you will do anything to make that happen. This past week, I was reading from the book of Numbers, and in Numbers 24, there's a story where the Israelites are going up to the promised land, and they go in to spy out the promised land. They send a person from every tribe, and 10 of the spies come back and say, it's impossible. 2 of them come back and say, we can do it. And I see this story where Moses is pleading and begging with God and saying, please forgive them. And God says over and over and over and over again, I have forgiven them, and I will forgive them again. But they're not going to see the fulfillment of my promise, except for Caleb. Because Caleb followed him passionately. Caleb had conviction. The rest of Israel had a commitment. They stood at the foot of Mount Sinai and they said, yes, we will follow the Lord. But Caleb had a conviction, and that drove him to follow after him with everything he had and believe there was nothing that God could not do. So as we think through this as our group, I want to encourage you with a few questions for your group to consider and talk about. I want you all to read Luke 14 together. Read it out loud. What are the hard things that Jesus says in there to count before you follow him? I want you to compare that to Matthew 10, 37 through 39. A very similar statement that Jesus made to the followers early on in his ministry. What are some of the same images that Jesus used? And what does that really communicate to us about how much it costs to actually follow Jesus? Let me ask you, what are the things that you are committed to? But also, what are the things that you are convicted about? The things that you are incredibly passionate about? How do we continue to keep ourselves going through difficult situations? I want to know, what is a passion that God has developed in your life recently? And how has that changed your actions because of it? And finally, I want you guys to talk about as a group, what is one thing that you can do this week to pursue a deeper relationship with God?